Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of animal drawing. And let's start with drawing this chicken. So I thought a lot about using construction and the action line. So the action line is the pose or the movement or the overall feeling, and that's where I like to start with, because then I can use those shapes to follow that line. So like you can see here, and I hope you can see that I'm following this force, but I don't break these shapes. And if you are starting with drawing these kind of things, it's really good to actually draw this character. Try to match it as the same as I did, and try to use the same steps. So you learn how to draw these all these different shapes. And like this ball, so that you learn how to draw these construction lines, and they're easy to understand, but it can be quite tricky to really master these kind of shapes. And if you know how to draw these shapes really well, then drawing characters like this will become much more easier. So I would recommend, if you're struggling with this, try to draw this chicken in the same steps as I'm doing here. And maybe if you can draw this chicken perfectly or even better, then maybe you can try to draw it in a different pose. Maybe he's picking on the ground. And how would you draw that in these shapes? So first draw the action line, then you're drawing these balls following this line, and then you're drawing the neck, and then the legs, and so on. So first learn to draw this, and then you can use this character to draw your own poses. And that's a great way of developing your skills and starting to understanding it. And the next step is to use that knowledge for your own characters. And you can also use this character. This character is already a little bit more complex. Um, so the same. And in this case, I started with this shape or this action line, and then I based this shape on it. So you can also try that. First draw an action line, and then basically a shape you kind of want to let the character look like, and then build these shapes, build these construction shapes on top of this shape. Add the volume to it. So like this here, and then we're adding this wing here, and then this tail, and then the legs. At first you can be really rough, and then you trying to add more geometry, so the adding more depth and shape, and then you can start on the final details, the final lines. And you can see that I don't draw these perfectly round, etc., but I give him a little corners to give it a little bit of style. And I will be talking more about it a bit later. So again, with the chicken, if you know how to draw the chicken, you can try it with this character or etc. I also have this pelican. You can also try it out with. Here you can see how I use these forces. So these lines are, I like to think of my characters as water, and how it's floating, and trying to get a rhythm in your character. Let it dance. And then start construction so that it's real solid. So you want to make your character solid as well, but also dynamic. And with dynamic means that it's not stiff. So the sketch, and then the line work, and then I add values, and then I add color. So in this tutorial book, I'm not talking a lot about coloring, but what I can say is, so if I have this sketch here, and you can also use your sketchbook, then you in Photoshop, you can put the layer on multiply, and under the layer, you can use with the lasso tool. And you can also do this in Procreate and other software. It's not that special. So for example, if we have the shape here, then I fill it with the base value, and then I make a separate layer for for the next. And it's all under it. And normally I take a bit more time so I can really make some nice selection. So like this. And when I've made all those different layers, I press this button in the layer panel. And then you can also paint some, for example, you can paint some shadow in it and so on. So that is how I color my characters basically. But also here, I think it's way more important to first learn how to draw and then start coloring. Of course, if you like to color your drawings, go ahead. But I would really focus on learning how to draw first, because that will help you, because that will grow you faster. And um, the coloring is something you can later start doing. So more line of action and a bit of poses. And I'm not talking that much about poses in this book because I think that's a whole different subject as well. But if you want to start out with, so here you can see these action lines like this here or here. And what you can do if you want to learn more about drawing poses, figure drawing is really good to learn it. You can also do figure drawing with animals. Look up some real animals, for example, a running cheetah, and see the action line and start making a drawing of that. But then think of the action line and the construction shapes and other things I'm trying to learn here. So here I'm having all these action lines. And then you can see basically adding shapes and let those shapes follow the action line. And also here we have this spine that's also following this line. And then you also have this simple versus complex, but that I will also talk a bit more about later. So what I want to give the tip for is that try to see the action line in poses. So for example, for running, it's almost like this. You could also draw this if he really needed to be really fast, then the action line will probably look something like this. And then he would look way more stretched. So here he's running away for his life. So maybe you can check out maybe some animation movies and freeze the frame and analyze those poses. It's a great way of learning how to draw poses. So goat, and here drawing a four-legged animal can be quite difficult, but using this action line, drawing the head first, and then here these two shapes, this is quite easy to draw. And then to draw the legs, and that's really funny because animals often walk on their toes. So we walk, so, and I will show an image of that. So our legs look like this. So we walk. So if this is 1, 2, 3, 4, then is this 1, 2, 3, 4. So analyzing that anatomy of animals really useful because then you know how to compare it and how to draw it better. So using these stick figures to make it yourself more easy. And if you have this, then you can start drawing on top of these shapes, like here. And then we can draw this leg here, and then this leg here, and then here this leg. Then we can add this one, and then this head here with the shape on top of this here. So again, like the chicken and stuff, you can follow these steps to learn this character, and maybe you can try out some different poses. Maybe you can look up some character from animation show and look at that pose and try to draw that character, draw that pose with this character. And that's also sometimes I do that for practicing, or I used to do that a lot. So, for example, if you have an animal in a Disney movie, and then you take another animal and try to draw it then in the pose, and that helps you learn how to draw your characters in different poses. I think this one is also great for learning how to draw those basic shapes, because here you have this circle like this here. And if you have trouble drawing this, yeah, it just takes time to learn these things. So don't. So it took me, I think, it took me years to really master it. So take your time for that. Don't stress out that it's not working right away. And if you get frustrated by it, maybe go do something else. Do some other drawing studies, or go draw something for fun. But studying this once in a while can really help you developing this method, and it will help you so much. Once you learned it, you can't unlearn it. So yeah, try. What's a good exercise is try to draw this character in shapes like this, and try to think of how is it in 3D. So here I have some sheeps. So when I'm designing a character for a client, maybe for an animation movie or something like that, then I give the client some different options. So most of the time I send 6 versions or something, but I make way more. And I try different things. I try so many different things that I can't come up with any other variation or any other versions. So maybe you can pick an animal, for example, turtle or something else, your favorite animal, and draw different versions, and see what you can come up with. And what I normally do is, when I'm working for freelance or I'm working in the studio and the client and I need to show something, then, for example, if I made all these 9 drawings, I maybe showed 3 of the best. Maybe I would like these 3 the best, then I would only show these, and I would save these for myself. So drawing a sheep, I think that's a great way of. So here, sheep is really fluffy. So you can have the body is here, but the hair is going all the ways up. So that's important to understand when you're drawing a sheep or any other animal. That's how that hair is. That hair needs space. Drawing pigeon. I think this one character is interesting because he's starting with a really basic shape like this. And you couldn't draw the character like this, but we can also make a twist in it. So that here's the front part and here's this part. So here can put the eyes, and then here we can put the body like this. So then we have this direction and this direction. But maybe you can try out drawing some different shapes. Maybe you can make a shape like this and then draw the pigeon, or maybe make him a really big head. So see what it does. You can play around with drawing those shapes. I think that's really fun. At least I'd like to do that. So I will show more about it later as well. So here again, using a big shape to draw this koala, draw this panda. So start with the big shape. And you can see there's still some action line in it. So try to have a shape. And here you can see that here this is a simple line, and here's more an S curve or B curve. So drawing sharks. Here is also really basic shapes with a clear action line. So these are also really interesting to draw. So how I draw these characters, I start with an action line, then I start drawing a shape like this. Then I also think about how is it in the 3D space. And again, maybe maybe this is hard to learn now, but try studying this shark. Draw this shark with construction lines and try to analyze it, how it's built up, and try to see all these different parts and how it's all connected to each other. So here we have this this character, and here I started also with an action line, but there are almost multiple action lines. So that is when you're drawing an octo. So yeah, you can play around with that if you try. But there's still a lot of construction, like this head. And then here I start adding these action lines here, but you can still see there's all these cylinders. You can almost see this thing as that's connected to all these cylinders like this here. So try to think in 3D again and how these are all connected. And what's important is that you draw these all through. When you're sketching, draw the lines all the way through, or else you will maybe make some mistake, or else you will maybe do this. You then draw the tentacle like this. And this actually an thing you often see. You can better do this. So here, draw this part and then this. And then later you can erase this middle part, like this here. So the platypus, and so drawing two characters. So here we have one, oh. So here we have one action line going like this, and then a smaller one. So then you can start drawing these characters on top of that. And it's important to let them look. And you can see that these action lines are also pointing together. And I'm also describing that here in the text more. But it's really interesting when you're drawing two characters, then you can play around with these action lines, having this harmony together to combine them, to combine those action lines. And for the rest, they're all the same as all the previous tutorials I've shown with the construction shapes and following that shape. But drawing two characters interacting with each other makes it a bit more difficult. But it does make more interesting because it adds story. And at one point you want to add more story in your drawings because that makes your drawings way more interesting. And also notice that you have these bubbles. There's also this action line in those bubbles. And I'm going to tell more about it in a bit. But here you have this simple side, and here you have this complex side. So there's contrast between these sides. But I will tell a bit more about that. Just try it, just be aware of that. Just there's know a bit about that. So drawing cute animals, then you can think of that you have this, that the head is often really big, as well as the eyes, and these really tiny nose and these round cheeks. So the characters are also often round and then small mouth and then these big pupils. So here we even making the character even more cute. Small eyebrows, small ears, and then pear-based body. Don't show any neck, and then here the legs, and then a tiny tail. So yeah, and you can analyze that by looking at your favorite animation shows and look at the cute characters. They often have round, big eyes, small facial features. Everything is really curved and rounded, no hard edges. So yeah, you see that with the villains. They often have sharp, dangerous edges, but young characters often have this fluffy hair. So let's go to these aging turtles. So again, starting with construction, etc., etc. But what I want to talk about in this image is how to use those, how to make the character older or younger. So here you can see the big head, the big eyes, and to make him a little bit older, just show him a bit more neck. So this character already looks a bit older than the previous. Okay, so if we want to make a really baby turtle, I would really draw something like this: no neck, maybe a tiny tail, really tiny legs, and these big eyes like this, and these tiny mouths. So this looks even more younger than this one. So this is baby, and this is a teenager, and this is maybe this young adult or an adult, and this the old guy. But here you can see I added more neck, and here the neck. So when he's adult, it's really strong. But when this character is older, it gets pulled down by gravity. So we get this old baggy neck. Also the skin starts to, so for example, if we have a hand of someone who's young, you get this arm. But someone who's old looks more like this, with this baggy arms. So you also see that in that character. The character is pulled down by gravity more. And of course, there's the mouth is really big, and the eyes are smaller, and they have these bags, and they seem tired, etc. And they have more spots like that. Construction. So here, this is a bit more complex construction. So let me show that a bit on one of these characters, like this here. So I do start with the ball, but then I keep adding all these corners and shapes to make the character a bit more interesting, and more, yeah, like this here. So it's more constructed. Then I add this and the beak, like this here, this big shape, like this here. and then the eyes, and I place the eyes on this mask. And this is a tutorial I gave in my human character book as well, but I often draw a mask when I'm drawing eyes. And then I try to think of that the eyes are a bit more inwards. And that's the same with a lot of animals. You have this mask. Think of the mask from the movie Incredibles. So that you have this. Or so you can see it here. So what I also like to think about, if we have the skull, and then we have these the eye sockets here, and it's just like there's someone took these cupcakes out of. So there's, you can feel that if you feel around your eyes, you can feel that this is, that you have your that you feel your skull, that you feel your eye sockets. So I don't know how a skull of a dog exactly looks like, but I imagine something like this. But you have these eye sockets. So maybe you can look it up on your favorite search engine and look up your skull of the animal you want to draw, and look at the eye sockets. You see that they often have something like the human skull, but then with the big beak on top of it. And again, I think these are also fine to study and learn how these are all constructed. So drawing this bird, I used silhouette, and I didn't really talk that much about silhouette. So silhouette is the negative space. So we can actually, if you see, if we can, oh, can I? Oh, it's already done. So here you can, I switch and only look at this part. So let's take this character. So here, make it a bit bigger. Also take the color out of it. You know what? Let's erase these parts to make it extra clear. So here, erasing. So even when you see the silhouette, you can still recognize it's this crow, or it looks like a crow. And oh, I think I really erased those parts. It's really white. So if we flip through it, now you see the spaces changes. So the white here, or the black here, is the negative space. Of the positive space, sorry. Positive. And the space around it is negative. You need to find a good balance between those characters. And if you have a good balance, then it's good readable. It's a bit like the yin yang sign. So that you have one this side. Think something like this. So there's a nice balance between that. And that helps make it readable. Because if you're making a character that is here, maybe this character looks more like this here. So in some cases, this is something you want, but most of the time not. For example, if you're drawing this character more like this, and the wing inside the body, and then these feet here. So this is less readable. So this one is more readable because value, black and white, and contrast is something we pick up earlier than colors. So think of some characters that are really famous. They have really strong silhouettes. That you still, even if you make them black white, you can recognize them. Think of that. Look at your favorite cartoons, and you will see that. So walrus also with a line of action, using a simple shape, but still here in this case, yeah, it's part of the character, the silhouette. And let me see. So I gave it a little bit silhouette by using this tail and these shapes. So here you can see that it's, yeah, a character like this, you will get a bit of a less strong silhouette. You could make it stronger by making these tooth really bigger. So that could help, especially when you make this one white. That helps also with the readability. Or yeah, give it more corner. But I choose to not to do that too much with this character. Because I wanted to give him this really fat body. And what I did do here is simple versus complex. And because if you just do this is a bit boring, but adding these shapes creates contrast between the two sides. So here this is simple, and then this is more complex. So that's, and I like that because when you're drawing, you're avoiding symmetry. And what you want is asymmetry. So this is more interesting. So especially here, this is a bit more organic. Perfect round things, you almost don't find that in nature. So that's why I'm using these tips like simple versus complex. And I will show some more next. So again, line of action and the simple versus complex side. Can you recognize the simple and the complex side in this character? Where's the simple side and what's the complex side? Again, starting with an action line and following the and adding these shapes on top of it. And then, so you start with this construction and you connect it with these longer lines. You're making it simple, more simple, and I'm using these kind of spots to create overlap. But I'll talk about it more in one of the next posts. Stingray. So here I'm showing the line of action. So this character is, what you can do is search on your favorite search engine and look for stingrays and draw this character in the poses from what you can find on the internet, and that can be really interesting to study. So that's a great exercise to find some pictures on the internet from stingrays and draw them in different poses, but use this design if you find it difficult to create a design of yourself. And think about construction, silhouette, and the line of action. Think of those different objects when you're making studies. So drawing this wolf, also with this line of action, but with force, and then drawing these shapes on top of it and let those follow that force. So here all these elements react to the full force. So here's some rough sketches. Think of the force. So try to see if you would draw these kind of characters and you can only use a simple shape to draw them. How would you draw them? Maybe one like this, and that other one is more like this. And then we have this. So this is, I think it's even a bit different. So this is the force of that character. This is the force of that character. It's not that complex. So drawing the horse can be really difficult. And what I like is that I think even in Chinese or Japanese or some other language where they use these kind of signs, the symbol for horse looks a bit like this. And it comes, there's this theory that a language is coming from that. So if you would draw a stick figure and then they remove the head, so you have something like this, and then they maybe make it more like this. So I think this is also person in a language, and it comes from this. So I find it funny. So when you have this symbol, you can start adding all these construction and still give it a bit of that flow, so it doesn't lose energy and force. You want to maintain those kind of energy and force. So here I adding more anatomy. And in this case, it can be useful to look up some horses on the internet and maybe look up some anatomy. If you search for anatomy on of a horse or etc., you see all these muscles, and you can try to simplify them. Maybe first draw them really realistic and then use these basic construction shapes, like I shown earlier, that you can use these construction shapes and then tweak them a bit to make every shape you want to make out of it. So a lion. So again, starting with an action line like this, and then you can start with drawing the head somewhere here. Then here we have these. So this animal is yawning, so he moves his back up, and this is all based on a photo. And then here he's pushing up his body, and then his tail, like this here. So, and so here we're using these forces to create this this character. Also, if you want to draw this sneaking character, you have this symbol. This is if you draw a sneaking character. This line of action is, I think this line of action is quite good to show that, because it stays close to the ground. And also his head is down. So it can also be embarrassed. If you give him a different expression, then you would have an embarrassed character more. But again, line of action and poses. Try studying on the internet some photos, maybe of a lion, and use this design of the lion to draw in some different expressions. And here, I think this lion would look a bit like this from a normal perspective. Maybe that can help you. So this is the really basic head anatomy of this lion that you could use if you want to. Or maybe you want to try out your own design. using spheres, circles to create overlap and foreshortening. So let me first explain what foreshortening is. So if you're looking at your hand, look at your hand and point your finger at your face. You see your hand. So, and now I'm pointing my finger to my face. Then you can see that here we know that it's coming to us. So what actually is happening, if this is the finger from the side, and this is the finger from the front, then when we're overlapping with perspective, this is happening. So we can draw this finger inside this shape. So this actually happening. And that is really weird for our mind to grasp. And that's why drawing cylinders is really important, because that helps with overlap. Maybe you can take a toilet roll or a cola can or maybe something else and try turning it around and see how this foreshortening looks like. I'm talking more about it in the perspective book, because that's it can be a whole separate chapter as well. But for this character, using these balls like this here can really make foreshortening easier to draw, because a circle is easy to draw, and then you can draw the back, and maybe you can use the stomach as well, and then you can use these action lines to give it depth, like this here. I hope it's still easy to follow. You can see that here. So here I'm using these perspective guides like this here and here. So maybe you can use that to create that. And also here, these kind of lines are also important. So if you have a line like the stomach here, and then the leg is behind it. So this is overlapping lines. So you get here this part here. So here, this line here, but also this line here. And or here, this line. So if I would draw the head and I would draw the ear like this, then it would look like it's perfect on the side. But if I draw it this, then there's just a little bit more depth. And also here, giving this ear this side gives it also a bit more depth. And here I'm using this hair to create overlap. And so I'm creating overlap also here with the nose. Yeah, adds more depth and makes your character more solid and that you can almost touch it, more 3D. So use more foreshortening. Maybe this one is maybe even simpler because of these shapes. You can use these cylinders to create this this character. So then this is the body, and then this is the head. And I always like to draw through these through these shapes. Then here's one leg, and then here is another leg part. Then here, and then here we have another part, etc. So here, and then here, and then here. So, and there's still a line of action in it. And this still looks a bit stiff. But if I've drawn this, and if it looks stiff in this stage, that's fine. Because now we can use these lines on top of this character to create more rhythm. Now we are creating rhythm on this character. So here, and the rhythm is basically this, that you're using, and that it's like that if you drop a ball in it, then you have this bouncing ball, and so forth. So here, and using these overlapping lines as well, and combining these shapes. So here I'm using overlapping line, but here I'm making almost, yeah, I'm making a single line. So what you can see here. So there's also this this contrast between simple and complex side. Also here, I didn't do that here because I didn't want to make it detailed, but you could do this. So this is a complex side and this simple side, and so on. So let's move to the horses. So starting with the biggest and main shapes first. So drawing a horse can be really difficult. So starting with these basic shapes can be really useful. And maybe you can do this, maybe you first try to copy this drawing, and then maybe try it after it with a photo from a horse on the internet. Then you can add in these stick figures. And the fun thing is this works with every character. And this can be a study of how to draw horses and more. So here, here, here. And sometimes when I'm drawing this, so then I noticed, oh, I need more, needs to be a bit more close to each other. And you can play around with that. Again, I think it's also really good to do this on paper, these kind of studies, because then you can't easily erase this and that and this. So it forces you to really think about the steps you make. It is harder, but you learn faster from it. So I'm now skipping some points, and that is to be true. I learned to draw with all these shapes, these construction shapes, but now a lot of times I skip that phase, but I do think about it. So when I go on automatic pilot, I sometimes just forget to draw that for reference or for class. And here these look also really more neatly than I normally do, but I draw them this perfect just to make them more clear for everyone who's following my tutorials. But go again, follow these steps, and maybe if you find this easy, try to look up a horse from the internet and try to draw it this way. I did. Again, more different horses, and here you can see the same as with the donkey I did, only the other way around. So starting with these balls that are overlapping each other. So here, then we have this like here, this here, and this here. And here we have these overlapping. But I do think these are a bit of also next level. So maybe if you find this too hard, try the more easy characters and try this later. Or if you, I think when you're learning to draw, it can be really frustrating. But if you can handle that frustration, then it's really good to try and push yourself. Make mistakes, learn from it. It takes a lot of time to learn these things. They're not hard to understand, but they're hard to master, to get it into your fingers. So I like this idea of using patterns for creating depth also. So when you're for example, when a tiger, for the body, using these lines here helps you create this 3D effect, because you can see that it's going over these shapes, and also with the leg. So here you can see that this pattern is going around it, and that helps creating the depth. Also here, this pattern of the white, you can see it's also going around. So try to use these things in your advantage. Also with the tail, here you can see that these patterns go around, and they're not straight down. They're always a bit going along the shapes. So a giraffe, it's basically a horse, but then with a really long neck. And you can play around with these shapes to create different designs. So we can even make these legs really short. So like this here. And then we can make this neck really wide. Maybe we can give him small. So now you get a really strange and weird animal. Doesn't even look like a giraffe. But what I'm telling is that you can use these proportions to create any kind of character. We can also make, just like in the previous video I did with the dog, you can make a dog head out of this here. So just playing around with these with the proportions. And here this turn, I could have drawn this character with the same direction of the head as the legs, but if we add this twist here, it makes it a bit more dynamic. So here you can see some different head size, where this is basically the same build as this one, but then I make this part longer, and this mouth a bit more droopy. Drawing perspective, and I'm doing that for the giraffe to create this depth. So perspective is, and this is not really the subject of this ebook, so it's going to be a bit short. But you start with a line of action like this, and then you have, and this is a line of action, what I'm saying, this is the horizon line, and you have vanishing points. So let's put a vanishing point here, and then you can draw lines coming from that vanishing point like this. So you could make a drawing with 1 point vanishing point, but in this case we're going to add another one, and let's place that one here with the lines coming from each other. And don't put those vanishing points too close to each other. But maybe you can play around with what happens when you put it closer or farther away. So here you can already see what I'm doing here. So on this perspective grid, we can draw this box here. Again, look up some perspective posts if you want to learn more about drawing perspective, because otherwise this tutorial will be way too long if I'm going too much in depth about it. But I hope this gives a bit of a grasp about it. Even when you're seeing this for the first time, don't worry if you don't immediately got it. It's good to be aware of it and to see how I do use it for characters. So I have this box, and now inside this box we can draw all these different objects. So, and then here this is then the neck, and then this is the body. We can also use a cylinder, and then here we have the legs. So if you have this, then that creates this sense of depth. So maybe you, the viewer, are this size, because on the horizon line, it's often at the same height of the eyes as the viewer. Because if this was a photo, so then this person would stand here with the photo camera, and then here would be the giraffe, and then would be a person next to it, something like this. So then you would, so this would be then the horizon line. So here we have this giraffe. So drawing it with these boxes, it's still hard, but it makes it a bit easier to do. So here, and there's legs here. So let me see, how far are we now? So we're already quite far, but we still need to go a bit. Squirrel contrast. So these are different styles. And it's not here, this one looks generic, but I think you can, you could see this one in maybe an Rick and Morty cartoon, or South Park, or any other cartoon. And you would see this more in an, maybe in Disney or in Looney Tunes or something else. And there's, of course, there's no wrong or right, but I like to draw more in this style. And I do that by avoiding even proportions, like I'm showing here. So I find, if I was building a snowman, I find this boring. I would find it more interesting if I play around with the sizes. So big, small, and medium. And what I'm also doing here is using different kinds of lines, CSI. And later I will show a more detailed post about that. And that is, let's see here. Here we have the fish. What I also like to avoid is the middle. So avoiding the middle. So what I often try to do is going for, because this looks generic, like this here. So a fish like this. Still, this fish has some appealing, I think, because of the big mouth. If we draw the fish here, so this looks quite boring. But if we do everything on the top, so maybe putting the eyes here, and then the mouth here, and then the tail here, maybe something here. So I'm playing around with, so I'm avoiding the middle. And here as well. So here I'm pushing everything down. And of course there are exceptions, but this is a rule you could follow to create more interesting characters, by giving this big forehead. So that was this part of this video, and in the next part I will show more about these advanced theories about drawing characters. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next part.